Hello everyone and welcome to my in-depth guide on how to break abyssal shields, otherwise known as abyssal ward. I wanted to make a really in-depth guide on how to break them and how they're different from regular shields an enemy might have, and showing with testing which characters are really good at it and which characters aren't. These wards you find exclusively on the Natlan Tenebris enemies, such as the Papilla or the Mimesis. So firstly, let me explain how they work. In comparison to a regular shield or ward, a regular ward needs elemental application to break it. Not every attack a character does elemental application, and I won't go into how that works right now. But to put it simply, on an abyssal ward, every hit does count, which means you want as many elemental hits and not physical as possible within a short time frame. For example, the 13 seconds you have to break the Papilla's ward, you need 72 hits in Abyss, or over a longer duration, 105 hits for the Mimesis. Alongside damaging reactions counting towards this, Natlan characters have a unique advantage against these enemies. Because they're used to fighting the Abyss, every time they do Night Soul or line damage to an enemy, it counts for 3 hits instead of 1. Okay, now I'm going to go through most of the characters I tested in release-ish order. If you want to have a quick look, I've ordered them in somewhat effectiveness in the description and included a Google Sheet with all of my estimations on for their hit counts. But now I'm going to go through my testing and comment any apparent information. The first character we'll look at is Amber, who applies a lot of hits in a duration of 2 seconds. There's also a lot of characters that I won't go into detail on, like Barbara. Barbara doesn't have any multi-hit abilities, her skill doesn't do any damage even though it does elemental application, so it doesn't actually count for any hits. If there's any important ones, you can always go and test them yourselves or talk about them in the comments. Beidou's burst can hit with Electro every second, but requires your character to do a normal attack to be able to trigger it. Fischl is the first more complicated character. Pre-C6, Oz fires 1 hit every second for 10 seconds. Once at C6, he hits every second for 12 seconds. After C6, he'll also perform coordinated attacks when your active character does an attack, and when you trigger an Electro reaction on Fischl, her A4 will hit, so you get an extra 2 hits for every reaction. Jean's burst only hits 3 times, but when the on-fielder has an element on them, she swells it off every second. Kaeya gets an extra projectile spinning around him once he hits C6, so he gets more hits. Klee's skill explodes into 8 bombs, and if you can group that, that's a lot of hits. Lisa's burst itself lasts a lot longer than 13 seconds. Ningguang, as an on-fielder, has a lot of hits in her kit. Her normals do 2 projectiles, and she has a lot of Star Jade she fires, getting more free stacks from her burst when she hits C6. Claymore users that spin round can continually spin by opening the map or a menu mid-spin. They'll keep spinning until they run out of stamina. Sucrose's infused burst hits a few times and triggers swirls, and if you on-field her, then she can trigger a hell of a lot more swirls. Anemo Traveler's burst is too mobile, but their skill has a short cast time and a lot of hits and swirls. Geo Traveler's burst only has a few hits. An infused Venti burst was one of the best off-field abilities I found. Xiangling's burst hits quite a few times, but more when you have her C4 to extend its duration. Guoba doesn't hit very much, but if you on-field Xiangling with a weapon infusion, her 4th normal attack has 4 hits, and so she can generate a lot of hits. After C6, Xinqiu gets more rain swords every 3rd coordinated attack, and every single one of those rain swords counts as a hit. When you on-field Tartaglia, he can proc Riptide every 1.5 seconds, generating a lot more hits. After C2, Xinyan's burst generates a high-level shield on her that has more hits to it, and at C6 with a weapon infusion, she has stamina reduction on her charge attack so she can spin for longer. Zhongli will generate one more hit for every single Geo construct resonating with his pillar. While Albedo's skill won't ever hit because it requires you to do damage to the enemy, his burst will have more hits if you use it while his skill is active.
This is long overdue. Next on the agenda. Way out of
Wu Tao is a great example of a character that you can play differently to get more hits out of their abilities. So instead of doing charge attacks, you're going to do normal attacks and dash after the fifth. Unfortunately, her Blood Blossom dot only hits every 4 seconds. Rosaria gets a longer duration of her burst at C2. Ayaka's burst at C2 triples the amount of hits it has, making it the most for any non-Natlan off-field ability. Her dash won't do anything though, because it does no damage. Sayu is one of the most silly on-field characters I tested. If you have a constant aura on the enemy, she can swirl more with her burst, but when her skill is infused, it's constantly hitting the enemy as you spin around them, and swirling, you get a crazy amount of hits. Yoimiya has quite fast normal attacks and so gets a reasonable amount of hits. Electro Traveler Burst hits every so often with coordinated attacks. Aloy's skill is a lot like Klee's, but only has 6 bombs instead of 8. Raiden's skill is a coordinated ability depending on damage, so it won't hit the ward at all. Kuki's burst hits more times if she's low HP. As you land C2 is quite common, I thought I'd also feature that here as it gives you some more hits. Dendro Traveler's burst hits more often if it becomes the Electro version. Klee had the most variation of about any character. When you trigger a Dendro reaction within her burst, it will extend the duration by a second up to 3 times. If you trigger a Dendro reaction before your boomerang comes back, it will also hit more. At C2, you will always get those extra hits from the skill, but again that effect will last longer if you trigger a Dendro reaction at any point throughout that skill. Dori's burst itself ticks really often and so hits a crazy amount of times. Tighnari gets a reasonable amount of hits when you on-field him, but he does it in such a short time, only 5 seconds. Layla's skill can get more hits if you use more skills over its duration. Hida's skill, while her burst is active, will trigger more often if you have 1 or 2 more Electro characters in your team. Many effects in Genshin require damage to be dealt to the enemy for them to work. Farazan C6 is one such ability, but because an Abyssal Ward makes an enemy immune, none of these will function. Wanderer gets a similar amount of hits if you either start with a charge attack or just do normal attacks instead, because the charge attack takes time but gives you attack speed from his artifact set. Yaya's C6 lets Skill Uruguay throw some extra radishes. Kirara's hold skill hits every 0.5 seconds, and her burst gives you 1 extra bomb for every 8,000 HP you have, up to 4. Lynette's burst will fire extra shots at C2, and at C6 casting your skill infuses your weapon with Anemo, meaning you can get a lot of attacks and swirls in. Wriothesley can't really stop his attack chain without waiting too long, so you just pummel the boss. Charlotte's skill marks and ticks the enemy for longer if you hold it, and at C6 every 6 seconds you get an extra coordinated attack. Chiori gets an extra doll for more hits if you have C1 or a construct. Arakina for this specific example will run out of her Bond of Life about 3/4 of the way through the combo, meaning she has to cast her skill and charge attack again. This is a perfect example of a combo where I tried to get the most hits for this specific situation, a solo run, but it's not something you should be doing when you're fighting these enemies. The purpose of this guide after all is just to try to help you think about this enemy in different ways. Clorand with her skill and burst only has about 10 seconds of uptime. The same can be said for Sethos' normal attack combo, as it only lasts about 8 seconds. Emily's skill and burst obviously get more hits if the enemy is burning. And we finally made it onto Natlan characters. Remember, for these examples, any Nightsoul aligned hits count for 3, and I've already added that to the totals. So even on-fielding a character like Kachina and jumping on her Twirly Whirly generates a lot of hits. Kenichi is absolutely one of the best characters to break these wars with. He has a lot of hits himself and he synergizes so well with burning. Mualani is a great example of why you shouldn't say just play Natlan characters, because she's awful at this. Auron gets one extra hit from his C6, and Auron's 4th constellation makes his burst spin round faster. Mawika's combo is quite hard to perform if you on-field her. This is because, just like Ridesly, even if you dash between normal attacks on the bike, it will continue doing the chain, but your 5th attack animation is so long you always want to try and avoid it. And so if you wait a little bit longer while your dash is happening, it'll reset your attack sequence, but it seems somewhat random, because especially your 1st and 2nd attack are really quick. Lanyan gets more hits on her skill from her C1. And surprisingly, the character to have the most hits was Pyro Traveler. Pyro Traveler's skill will last longer if you use your burst or trigger reactions while it's active. And at C6 you can get that Pyro infusion, so stacking them both together generates a lot of hits, though their skill will only ever last a maximum of 12 seconds. Because her abilities don't infuse, you need good elemental application to get as many swirls as possible while on-fielding Mizuki. Varesa's animations are quite quick, and when you plunge you generate 2 hits, a collision and a landing hit. Simpler transformative reactions like Swirl, Overload, and Superconduct count for 1 hit each. Dendro Seed reactions like Hyper Bloom, Bloom, and Burgeon also count for 1 hit. Though for all of these transformative reactions, there's a cooldown of 0.5 seconds for how often an enemy can be hit by this damage. This is apparent for Burgeon and Hyper Bloom. For example, if Kuki's skill triggers on 5 seeds on the ground, they all will instantly go and hit the opponent, and only 1 will count as a hit. This means Bloom teams can be slightly better, though because of the hits Kuki does herself with her abilities, and the Hyper Blooms will make these seeds trigger quicker, means that you will never want to skip using a character's skill. Burning, on the other hand, has no cooldown and triggers damage 4 times a second. Over 13 seconds, that would be 52 hits. And lastly, Electro Charge takes down while you have Hydra and Electro on the opponent, but only happens once every second.